David Smith is our speaker today. He's a lifelong resident of Columbus, Georgia, and has deep ties to rural communities in the Southwest, Southeast, and Central areas of our state. He's spent much of his life working in advocacy, and today is an organizer at FairCount, which is a nonpartisan 501c3 committed to building long-term power in rural Georgia through non-extractive community organizing and civic engagement. Please join me in welcoming David Smith.
Hello, everybody. It is so nice to see everyone again. I have missed folks so much. So just to give you a little preview of what I'll be talking about today, we're going to talk about what FairCount does and how that differs from a lot of groups that have organized in Georgia in the past, how I came to be involved personally in it, and kind of give you a life update, because I know it has been a minute since I've been here, and just kind of talk about that, and what we're doing on the ground across rural Georgia, and also just sort of how you can get involved and help as well in the fight. So we were founded in 2019. And one of the things that differentiates us from other groups is that we're nonpartisan. We are a progressive organization. We state that fully and proudly, but we are nonpartisan. And we work to help underserved and underrepresented communities, particularly in rural Georgia. And we do that through something called non-extractive organizing. So I know a lot of people here have probably volunteered on a campaign once or twice in their lives, and this is typically how the campaigns go. So 3 to 4 months before the election, they hire a ton of people and they get all of this stuff set up, and then you go through October, and you go through October into November, and you have these just these huge masses of people, huge masses of volunteers there to get candidate A or B elected, and you get these whole communities kind of together, and you kind of you take a lot of the resources from them to pool for these candidates, and then those campaigns leave. All of that work, all of that organization is gone. If election day is on the 4th, it's gone on the 5th. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's what those campaigns are there to do, is to elect this candidate or elect these people. But what that often does, this boom-bust cycle of organizing, it leaves these huge gaps in the community, because there's problems all during the year, not just those 4 months right before the election. And so what FairCount has really kind of stepped up to the plate to do is to not take from the community, but kind of give back and build up a community, particularly in rural Georgia, going into these places that have never really been touched by a campaign before, and fighting to increase their power in voting so that they have a voice at the table. And one of the ways we do that is by working together with different people in the community. We work with a lot of librarians, a lot of civic people. We work with elected officials that aren't in campaign mode, so they might not be up this election cycle. We work with a lot of, and just general community members. Those are the kind of the key people we work with. And we kind of build out a network of support. We build out a network of people that we can rely on. So if we do when we start going into these communities, it's with people that know the community. That's another big problem with a lot of campaigns. They'll hire people from not just out of the city, but from out of the state, who come down here and try to, who don't know the communities, they don't know the cultural significance of places, they don't know what makes this community the community it is. And you have a really hard time gelling, and that can lead to problems. So we really try to bring up people who are in the community, and organizers and lead organizers such as myself who are from these areas, so that we can help in that because we know the area. And so one thing that we do is we leverage field operations, technology, faith connections, and national and community partnerships to promote and advocate and mobilize for civic participation. And that can take a couple of different forms, which I'll talk about. But we got started a lot with the census, getting people signed up for the census. We've shifted into redistricting, and now we are fully engaged. Let me back up. When the pandemic hit, we became fully engaged with vaccination efforts and getting people in rural Georgia vaccinated because they do not have access to the health care that people in Columbus or Atlanta do. And then as we've gotten closer to 2022 and gotten into 2022, we have moved into voter mobilization and voter engagement to get folks out to the polls to vote. And this is what we were talking about, what I was talking about, the U.S. Census to redistricting and voting. And why the census is important is every time you fill out your census, that is money for your community. One person filling out their census form is an extra $10,000 for your community. It's that big of an impact. So you see why even a couple of people not filling out their census forms can have a detrimental impact on their community. But it also has longer term ramifications for that, 10-year ramifications actually, when we move into redistricting. Because what happens is our government takes the census data and uses it to draw our lines. They see, well, this community has grown exponentially, they need to more congressional districts, or we need to create a whole new congressional district, new district maps, and that sort of stuff. Or the flip side, which unfortunately is happening in a lot of rural Georgia, is this county has lost so many people, they don't need as many commissioners, they don't need as many city council people, or they don't even need a legislative district, and it can be kind of conjoined with another one. And that can have long-term representation for how community is represented. And that's where a lot of gerrymandering can come in, is especially in communities that have lost population. It's really easy to gerrymander them because there's less people and it's easier to move the borders around to suit political purposes. And then, of course, voting is our key focus at the moment because we really do believe that our democracy is stronger when every single person participates. And that hasn't always been the case in Georgia, and it isn't always easy in Georgia, but we're doing our best to make sure that every person that can vote gets out to vote. And so some of our different programs are Black Men Count. This started in 2020 as an effort for the census, but it's ongoing right now. Black Men Count was created to ensure black men were fully represented in the 2020 census. Fair Count established Black Men Count. Since its inception, Black Men Count has worked to provide information and resources that empower black men in our communities and help increase participation in redistricting and voting. Like I said, that's still ongoing. We had a basketball match in Americus, actually, Fair Count did, with Black Men Count down at Southwest Georgia Technical College, I believe, in Americus. I hope I got that name right for the college. But that's one of the things, that's kind of a sub-organization and group that is in Fair Count that we use to engage that population. But that's not the only one. We also have Sisters for Civics. It's a growing coalition of different people dedicated to ensure that Black, Latinx, Native, and AAPI women and girls are seen and heard in our shared civic life. And so I want to kind of talk, before I get into kind of who our demographic of people that we talk to and we try to reach, one of the other things we do are technology solutions, because it's not just about getting out to the polls. There's a whole another level to civic engagement. So one of the ways we do that is we have this thing called internet installations. So we will go to places in rural Georgia and we provide them with internet. We go there, we set up a hotspot, and if they already have internet, we will provide them with laptops and other technology that allows them to do their jobs. So if you know of any deserving places in rural Georgia or anywhere kind of outside of Metro Atlanta, I'm all ears and would love to hear it. But that's one way that we do the long-term engaging with the community and long-term organizing, because while we do want you to be able to go out and vote, if your community doesn't have access to internet, how are you going to register to vote? How are you going to check your status? How are you going to apply for a job? How are you going to basically do anything you need to do in the modern world? And in rural Georgia, that basic technology is missing in a lot of places. So Faircount has kind of stepped in to help fill that gap. Me in particular, I've worked with a lot of libraries in rural Georgia, Calhoun, Quitman, and Chattahoochee County in particular. And they have internet provided by the state, but they don't have a lot of computers. So we go in there, for instance, and provide them with laptops because, it's great if you've got one laptop for the whole county, but if two people need to do something, then, well, that's a problem. And so one of our other programs is Faith Connections. We organize within faith communities because those are often the centers of rural community. So we've got people who are faith organizers who go into AME churches, Methodist churches, and communities all over rural Georgia. But it's not just obviously Christian-based. We go into any and all faith institutions, but obviously in rural Georgia, Christian churches ended up being kind of the main source of people. But that's kind of one of our big new things that we've introduced recently. And like I said, we partner with a lot of different community organizations as well. As long as they're, not political organizations, we'll partner with basically anybody we can talk to. We work really well with Family Connections to provide resources to different people. And we work with different nonprofit, nonpartisan voting rights groups to help spread our message. And and those are kind of the big things that we do with that. One thing that we've recently kind of done is Fair Districts. We held nearly 80 events showing people how to testify, submit their own community maps, and to speak up for how their community should be represented, ultimately training more than 1,000 people. And this was during our big redistricting push. And we contacted people who lived in districts that Faircount determined, in counties that Faircount determined were really at risk for gerrymandering. So how was that likely? Were we able to determine that? If the county lost a significant amount of population between this past census and this current census period, if it was a majority people of color that lived in there, because unfortunately a lot of gerrymandering, the government likes to gerrymander those places, and if they were rural, it's a lot easier to gerrymander rural communities. And so we contacted a lot of people, for instance, in Stewart County, in Dooley County. Those were a lot of the areas we contacted, and we got people to draw their own legislative maps to submit it, because by law, your legislatures are supposed to consider community input. This is our current program, though, and this is the big thing that we're dealing with. Vote 365, we launched it on November the 8th, and we are going to do it all the way till November the 8th, 2022. And we are committed to making sure that there's a sustained get out the vote effort across all of rural Georgia so that we can mobilize people, voters of color, to get out to the polls. And so what our strategy is, and kind of our general plan, is we are focused on hiring local trained organizers from those community. We've got myself, we've got people all across Georgia, North Georgia, Central Georgia, Southeast, Southwest, all over, except for, we do have some folks who live in Metro Atlanta who go out, but we're not focused on Metro Atlanta. And the reason that we're not is because in Georgia, what will happen is a group will show up and they'll go, oh my goodness, Georgia is this great place and we really want them to do great. We're going to send $50 million to Georgia. And do you know where all, let's say 49.9 million of that goes? It all goes to Atlanta. Or the major metropolitan areas. And we're not saying that those voters don't matter or that they don't need to be reached, but there are plenty of organizations doing that. But where Faircount saw a need was in rural Georgia. Because if an outside group invests $50 million, Columbus might get some of that, Augusta might get some of that, Macon, Savannah, but none of that is going to go to Cuthbert. None of that's going to go to Kingsland. None of that's going to go to Brunswick. It just doesn't flow down that way. And so we are coming into these communities to fill these gaps and get these voters out. Because people who live in Atlanta or the rest of DeKalb and Fulton, they're going to get plenty of reminders to go out and vote. But that's not the case in Calhoun County, in Randolph County, and places in Southwest Georgia and across rural Georgia. And so we are specifically targeting currently Black voters, Latinx voters, and Native American voters, because they have the largest vote share gap. And what the vote share gap is, if you say have 50% of your community is registered African American voters, but when election season comes, only 47% of registered voters that actually turned out are black, you've got a 3% vote gap. And so we are really trying to go into these rural communities that have these big vote gaps and close those vote share gaps. And where you see the most of that is in rural Georgia, particularly in the areas, it's spread all over, but particularly kind of Albany through Macon, kind of past between Albany and Macon, those rural counties. And they're majority white in most cases, but they have large populations of people of color, and their vote share gaps can sometimes reach 8% in Dooley County, I believe. And so you've got tons of voters who aren't getting out to vote. And we are trying our best to get in there and solve that issue. And we are going to, and those are our main goals, is making sure that everybody in our democracy gets out and votes. The Communities Fair Count Works With voted in record numbers in November 2020 and in January 2021. But democracy is not won or lost in one census or one election. Lasting change requires focus, patience, and sustained engagement. Georgia voters are here to stay, and Fair Count is too. And so that's kind of the key pinnacle of what we are as an organization. We are going to make sure that we are here. We are not in the boom bust business. We are here to stay in these rural communities that have not had a lot of attention, have been ignored for years by campaigns, and we are there to make sure that they have the political power they need to get the change that they deserve in their communities. And so real quick, I want to talk about voting. We have a primary coming up, and I wanted to talk about that just really quick. You've got multiple different ways that you can vote, but where you can go and check your voter registration information is the My Voter page. That's the website right there. It's the Secretary of State's website. And you can check your voter registration status, your mail-in. You can get your mail-in ballot application and check the status of it. Find your polling location. You can get sample ballots. It is a really great tool that you can use to go and check to learn all the information you need about voting. And like I said, there's 3 ways that you can vote in Georgia. You've got absentee by mail, which is a lot of folks used during the pandemic. You've got early in person and obviously on election day itself. And I'm not going to bore you all with these dates right now, but but these are the kind of the information that you really need to know is that May 2nd is when early voting begins, and it runs through May 20th. There's also mandatory Saturday voting, as well as optional Sunday voting, which some counties may do and some counties may not. Muskogee County tends to do it, but obviously that's up to the Board of Elections. And so those are the big dates. You can also go ahead and start requesting your absentee ballots. Those need to be in the mail they need to be requested by the 13th. And like I said, you can check the My Voter page for all your information on your locations and times where you can do that. You can also call your local elections office. And these are, again, the big kind of the dates that we have. May 24th, and then the primary will be June 21st. And then election day is November the 8th. And then the runoff, which we will have a runoff because it's Georgia, is the 6th. Alrighty, and so I want to take this time as well to kind of talk about how I got involved with the organization. I know I went over a lot of information pretty quickly, but I will kind of hit on that and questions and everything. But I kind of wanted to talk about what's been going on with me and where I've been and what's going on. So after the 2020 election, I decided that I really wanted to focus on I wanted to kind of go in a different direction and kind of follow my dreams and kind of go after some different opportunities. So I applied to a lot of MFA programs, which are Masters of Fine Arts in Fiction Writing. And one thing that I didn't know at the time, but that what I learned during it, is when an economic kind of earthquake happens or an economic downturn as happened during the pandemic, undergraduate applications plummet. People don't go to undergrad. Like those 4 years, they don't do that. However, people apply to graduate schools at record numbers because they want to get out of the workforce. So I ended up applying basically during the worst time possible to apply for graduate schools. I got into a lot of great programs. I got into Columbia and Western Kentucky, but I ended up deciding that it wasn't for me, and I kind of got a lot of signs from the universe that it wasn't really what I needed to be doing at the time. I haven't stopped writing, of course, but I ended up coming back, kind of focusing on Georgia instead of going out to Kentucky. And I started working with Fair Count because it was an organization that really kind of filled these needs that I have felt that had been vacant since 2014. And so I'm still focusing on my writing and everything, but I'm able to do it also while doing work that is so critical and important. And so I can talk more about it, on a one-on-one basis, but I kind of wanted to give you that. And also to let you know that I know I haven't been here. I need to be here more, but I just want you to know that I'm always a UU, and I love each and every one of you, and this community is so important to me, and I value it so much, and thank you for listening to me today.
Friends, on this morning, we have enjoyed the warmth and beauty of this flame and our community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within, and let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond.